The morning sun touched the glass windows of the grand concert hall, turning them golden. Inside, everything was calm but busy. Workers moved around, setting up chairs, polishing floors, testing lights, and checking sound systems. A famous charity concert was going to take place that evening, and everyone was rushing to make things perfect. Among all the people running here and there was a woman in a plain gray uniform, holding a small bucket and a piece of cloth. Her name was Maria Alvarez, and she worked as a maid in the concert hall. She was quiet, polite, and always on time. Most people didn't even notice her when she walked past. She never spoke much, only smiled when someone greeted her. She had been working there for almost 3 years. Every day she came before sunrise, cleaned the stage, mopped the corridors, dusted the velvet curtains, and made sure the seats were spotless. She stayed until late, sometimes long after the musicians had gone home. To everyone, she was just the cleaning lady, but no one knew what went on inside Maria's heart. Whenever she cleaned the stage, she looked at the big black grand piano in the center. It stood there like a sleeping giant, waiting for someone to wake it with music. Every time she passed by, she felt something deep inside her stir, a mixture of longing and pain. Sometimes when no one was looking, she gently ran her fingers over the cool white keys. She never pressed them, afraid the sound might get her in trouble, but in her mind she could already hear the notes she wanted to play. Maria had once dreamed of becoming a pianist. Back home in the Philippines, when she was young, her father worked as a school janitor. In that same school stood an old upright piano that no one played anymore. During lunch breaks, little Maria used to sit there watching her father sweep the floor and press a few keys softly. The sound fascinated her. It was the beginning of something she didn't yet understand. Her father noticed her curiosity and asked the music teacher if she could teach Maria after school. The teacher agreed, and soon Maria learned how to play simple songs. It turned out she had a rare gift. She could listen to a tune once and play it back almost perfectly. By the age of 14, she could play pieces that adults struggled with. Her dream grew bigger each year. She wanted to study music seriously, maybe even play in a concert one day. But life had other plans. Her father got sick and her family's bills grew heavy. Maria had to leave school to work. She started cleaning houses, helping in small cafes, doing whatever she could to support her family. The piano slowly disappeared from her daily life, but it never disappeared from her heart. Years later, when she moved abroad to work as a maid, she thought those dreams were gone forever. The grand concert hall was the closest she'd ever come to that world again, a world of music, light, and applause. But it didn't belong to her anymore. She belonged to the world of mops, dustpans, and quiet corners. Still, every time the orchestra rehearsed, she found excuses to stay nearby, pretending to clean a little longer than needed. She loved the sound of violins warming up, the deep hum of cellos, the gentle touch of the piano. Her eyes sparkled whenever someone played a beautiful melody. Music made her forget who she was, even if only for a moment. The other staff sometimes teased her kindly. "You really like this music, don't you, Maria?" one of them asked one afternoon. She smiled shyly. "It reminds me of home," she said. No one knew how true that was. One evening, after everyone had left and the hall was empty, Maria finished her work and sat alone in the corner. The huge room was silent now. The lights were dim. The piano stood in the middle of the stage, shining softly under the ceiling lights. She looked around. No one was there. The security guard usually came by in half an hour for his round. Her heart beat faster as she walked toward the stage. Her shoes made small, nervous sounds on the wooden floor. When she reached the piano, she took a deep breath. Her hands were trembling a little. It had been many years since she last touched one like this. She sat down carefully, afraid to leave marks on the clean bench. For a few seconds, she just sat there, her fingers hovering above the keys. Then she pressed one, and a soft, clear note filled the air. It echoed gently through the empty hall. Her heart jumped. She pressed another key, then another, slowly forming a melody she still remembered from her childhood. A lullaby her mother used to sing. The music came back to her like an old friend. She forgot she was wearing a maid's uniform. She forgot about her tired feet and long shifts. For those few minutes, she was just Maria, the girl who loved music. Her fingers moved faster, her body swayed with the rhythm. The sound filled every corner of the hall. It wasn't perfect. Some notes slipped, some were uneven, But the feeling was real, full of love and sadness. She didn't know that someone was listening. A security guard named Daniel had come in early for his patrol. He heard the music and stopped near the door, surprised. Who could be playing at this hour? When he peeked inside, he saw Maria sitting at the piano, her eyes closed, completely lost in the music. He didn't move. He didn't even breathe loudly. He just watched. When she finished, she looked up and saw him standing there. Her face turned red. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, standing up. "I shouldn't have touched it. I'll leave now." But Daniel smiled. No, he said softly. "That was beautiful. I didn't know you could play like that." She shook her head. "It's nothing. Just old memories." Then she picked up her cleaning cloth and hurried out before he could say more. The next morning, Daniel told one of the lighting technicians what he saw. By lunchtime, the story had spread among the backstage crew. "Did you hear? The maid was playing the piano last night," someone whispered. "They say she's amazing," another added. Some laughed, thinking it was a joke. Others were curious. "Maybe we should ask her to play for us," one of them said. Maria overheard their chatter as she swept the hallway. She kept her head down and pretended not to hear, but inside her stomach twisted. She didn't want attention. She didn't want to be laughed at. Music was her private world, the only place she still felt free. That evening, as she finished cleaning, she saw the grand piano again. It seemed to look at her as if asking her to come closer. But she didn't dare. The rumor had spread too quickly. She couldn't risk her job. She had bills to pay and her family depended on her. Still, the thought wouldn't leave her. The keys had felt like home under her fingers. She lay awake that night, hearing the notes in her mind, playing over and over. The next few days were busy. The concert was approaching fast, and more famous guests were expected to attend. The hall buzzed with energy. The musicians practiced long hours. The decorators hung fresh flowers, and the staff worked late into the night. Maria kept doing her job silently, but now some people looked at her differently. Some smiled knowingly. Others whispered when she passed. She could feel their eyes on her. One afternoon, as she was cleaning near the stage, one of the assistant managers approached her. He was a kind man in his 50s. "I heard you play the piano," he said, smiling gently. "Is that true?" Maria froze. "No, sir. I touched it a little. I'm sorry if that was wrong." He laughed softly. "Wrong? Not at all. We could use more music around here." Then he winked and walked away. His words stayed with her all day. Maybe, just maybe, her music wasn't meant to stay hidden forever. But for now, she kept her secret close. The concert day was almost here. The audience would soon fill every seat. The bright lights, the fancy clothes, the sound of applause. It would all happen right here. In this very hall and somewhere in the back, sweeping the floor and emptying trash bins, Maria would be watching quietly, just another face in the shadows. No one in that glamorous crowd would imagine that the quiet maid they passed by every day once dreamed of standing where the world's best musicians stood. No one could have guessed that soon. The woman they barely noticed would walk up to that same piano and change everything. For the next few days, the concert hall buzzed like a beehive. The air was full of sounds. Violins tuning, pianos echoing, people talking through microphones. Workers carried equipment, musicians rehearsed, and staff hurried across the hall trying to fix last-minute issues. Everyone was focused on the big charity concert that was just around the corner. Maria, as always, moved quietly through the crowd with her mop and bucket. Nobody really noticed her. She swept the floors near the stage and polished the shining marble tiles at the entrance. But this time something felt different. Ever since the night she played the piano, she felt alive again, as if an old part of her had woken up after sleeping for years. Still, she was nervous. Some staff members now looked at her differently. A few smiled kindly, but others whispered behind her back. She could hear small pieces of their talk. "The maid plays the piano. Maybe she's lying. Someone should make her prove it." Every time she heard that, her heart sank. She didn't want attention. She only wanted to keep her job and send money back home. But now her small secret had started to float through the building like perfume. Impossible to catch. Impossible to hide. One afternoon, when she finished wiping the chairs in the balcony area, she heard two musicians chatting below. "Did you hear about the cleaning lady who played the piano?" one said with a laugh. "Yeah," the other replied. "The guard said she's good." Maybe she should open the concert for us. They both laughed again and went back to tuning their violins. Maria stood frozen. She didn't know whether to feel embarrassed or proud. The truth was, she hadn't played for a long time, and she wasn't sure if she could play well anymore. That short moment the other night had felt magical, but could she really do it again in front of others? That evening, when the rehearsal ended, she stayed a little longer to clean the stage. The grand piano stood in its place, quiet and elegant under the dim lights. She looked around, no one was there. Her heart began to race. Slowly she walked to the piano, her fingers trembling again. She touched one key softly. A sweet familiar note filled the air, then another and another. Before she knew it, she was playing again. This time a soft tune she used to love when she was young. She didn't notice that someone was watching from the doorway. It was the stage manager, a kind woman who had worked in the hall for years. She stood silently, listening. The music floated around her like a dream. When Maria finally stopped, she turned around, startled to see someone there. "I'm sorry," Maria said quickly, standing up. "I was just—" The stage manager raised her hand gently. "Don't apologize. That was beautiful," Maria blushed. "Thank you, ma'am. I shouldn't have touched it. Please," the woman said with a warm smile. "Music is meant to be played. You have a gift, Maria." Maria didn't know what to say. Compliments were rare in her world. She just nodded, picked up her cleaning cloth, and left quietly. The next morning, a new wave of whispers spread through the staff. "The manager heard her play last night," someone said, "and she said it was amazing." Word traveled fast, faster than Maria could handle. By now, everyone knew. Even the conductor, a serious man who rarely smiled, had heard the story. During lunch, he came down to the staff area where the workers ate. When Maria saw him walking toward her, she almost dropped her plate. "Are you Maria?" he asked kindly. "Yes, sir," she replied softly, her heart beating fast. "I heard you can play the piano," he said. "Is that true?" "I used to," she said carefully. "A long time ago," he smiled. "Maybe you can show us sometime." Music should never be hidden. She didn't know what to say. She only nodded, still unsure whether it was a compliment or a test. That night, she sat in her small rented room, staring at her hands. They were rough and tired from years of cleaning. She remembered the days when those same hands used to glide across piano keys with ease. She missed that feeling. The smoothness of the keys, the vibration under her fingers, the sound filling her heart. For a moment, she thought of quitting her job. The rumors made her anxious, and she didn't want to be the center of attention. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Maybe this is your second chance." The next few days passed quickly. The final rehearsal for the concert was happening on Friday. Maria worked harder than ever, making sure everything was spotless. She wanted the hall to shine for the big day, but then something unexpected happened. On the morning of the rehearsal, one of the assistant organizers came running into the hall, holding his phone with a worried face. "The opening pianist can't come," he said loudly. "She's sick and stuck in the hospital." "What are we going to do now?" Everyone started talking at once. The program had been planned for weeks, and now the opening act was gone. They needed someone to play the first 10 minutes, something simple but beautiful, to set the mood before the orchestra began. The conductor rubbed his forehead. "We can't cancel the opening. We need someone." Then the stage manager spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "There is someone," she said. "But you might not expect it." All eyes turned to her. She looked toward the cleaning area where Maria was mopping the floor quietly. "Her?" one of the staff members asked in surprise. The stage manager nodded. "Yes, I've heard her play. She's very good." Maria froze. The mop stopped moving in her hands. "Me?" she said, her voice shaking. No, I can't." The conductor smiled kindly. "Just a small piece, Maria. Only if you're comfortable. We just need someone for the rehearsal to test the timing." Her mind went blank. Part of her wanted to run away, but another part whispered that this might be her only chance. She looked at the piano. It seemed to be waiting for her. She took a slow breath and nodded. "All right, I can try." Everyone watched as she walked to the stage. Some whispered to each other, unsure what to expect. She sat down carefully, her hands trembling. For a few seconds there was silence. Then she closed her eyes and began to play. The first few notes were soft, uncertain, but soon the sound grew stronger, richer. Her hands moved gracefully like they remembered what her mind had forgotten. The melody filled the hall. calm, emotional, and full of life. The workers stopped moving. The conductor lowered his baton. Even the lighting crew stood still, listening. When she finished, the hall was silent for a few seconds. Then someone started clapping, slowly at first, then louder until everyone joined in. Maria looked up, surprised. She had no idea what to do. Her face turned red and she smiled shyly. "That was wonderful," the conductor said, walking toward her. "You just saved our rehearsal." "Thank you." Maria stood up quickly. "It was nothing, sir. I'm glad I could help." But everyone knew it was more than nothing. Later that evening, when she was about to leave, the stage manager stopped her at the door. "Maria," she said softly, "the conductor wants to talk to you tomorrow morning. Don't be nervous, it's good news." Maria's heart raced. What could it be? That night she barely slept. She lay awake thinking about the music, about the feeling of playing again, about the smiles she saw on people's faces. For the first time in many years, she felt proud, truly proud. The next morning, she walked into the hall early. The conductor was already there, waiting near the piano. He smiled warmly. "Maria," he said, "I have a request. Since our opening pianist can't perform, would you consider playing the opening piece at the actual concert?" Maria's eyes widened. "Me? But I'm just a maid." He shook his head gently. "No, you're a musician who forgot how to dream. It's time to remember." She didn't answer right away. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "I'm scared," she whispered. "That means it's important," he replied with a kind smile. "Will you do it?" Maria took a deep breath. Her heart felt heavy but alive. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "I'll play," the conductor smiled. "Good. Then let's make sure the world hears you." And just like that, everything changed. The quiet maid who once hid in the shadows now had a place in the spotlight. No one could have guessed that the woman who mopped the floors every night would soon sit at that grand piano. Not as a cleaner, but as a performer. The concert was only 2 days away, and the hall didn't know it yet, but something unforgettable was about to happen. The next 2 days passed like a dream for Maria. Everything around her felt unreal. She still wore her maid's uniform, still carried her cleaning cloth and mop, but people now looked at her differently. Some smiled when she passed, others whispered softly, and a few nodded with quiet respect. She could feel their eyes following her, not in a bad way, just full of curiosity. Everyone in the hall knew that the maid was going to play in the concert. Some were excited, some were doubtful, and some simply didn't believe it would really happen. Maria herself wasn't sure she believed it either. Every time she thought about sitting at that grand piano in front of hundreds of people, her stomach tightened. What if she made a mistake? What if people laughed? What if the conductor regretted giving her this chance? She had waited years for something like this, yet now, the closer it came, the more afraid she felt. That afternoon, the conductor asked her to come to the stage for a short practice session. The hall was mostly empty except for a few technicians adjusting lights. Maria walked slowly toward the piano, her hands cold with nerves. "Take your time," the conductor said kindly. "We'll just go through the opening piece." She nodded, sat down, and closed her eyes for a second. The sound of her heartbeat filled her ears. Then she began to play. The first few notes came softly, like a whisper. But as the melody grew, her hands found confidence. The hall filled with music again, gentle, emotional, full of warmth. The conductor listened quietly, his eyes focused on her fingers. When she finished, he smiled. "That's it," he said softly. "That's exactly what we need," Maria breathed out, relieved. "I hope I can play like that during the concert," she said. "You will," he replied. "Just play from your heart. That's something no training can teach." She smiled shyly. His words stayed with her all day. That night, when she went home, she practiced on an old keyboard she had borrowed from a neighbor years ago. It didn't sound perfect. Some keys didn't even work, but she didn't care. She played until midnight, trying to make her fingers remember everything they once knew. As she played, her mind went back to her childhood again, those afternoons in her father's school, when she first fell in love with music. She could almost see her father standing by the door, smiling proudly. That memory gave her strength. The morning of the concert arrived. The hall was glowing with golden lights and the air buzzed with excitement. Workers ran back and forth, arranging flowers, checking microphones, and greeting guests. The orchestra tuned their instruments. Reporters and photographers waited outside for celebrities and donors to arrive. And in the middle of it all, Maria stood backstage, holding her shaking hands together. She had never been this nervous in her life. One of the other workers, an older woman she often shared lunch with, came up and touched her arm. "You'll be amazing," she said kindly. "Just be yourself." Maria nodded, though her throat felt tight. She peeked through the curtain and saw the sea of people filling the seats. Elegant dresses, shiny shoes, black tuxedos, and everyone looked so grand. Her heart sank a little. She had never been part of a world like this. She was just a maid, someone who cleaned after these people. She looked down at her uniform. The conductor had offered her a formal dress, but she refused. "This is who I am," she had said quietly. "If I play, I'll play as me." Now standing there, she wondered if that had been a mistake. Would people take her seriously dressed like this? The conductor approached her gently. "Are you ready, Maria?" She took a deep breath. "I think so," she whispered. He smiled. "Remember, music doesn't care what you wear. It only listens to your heart." His words gave her courage. When the lights dimmed, the noise in the hall faded into a hush. The host walked onto the stage and welcomed the audience. "Before we begin," he said, "we have a small surprise for you tonight. Due to an unexpected situation, our opening act has changed. Please welcome someone special, a member of our very own staff." People looked at each other curiously. A few murmurs spread through the crowd. Then the spotlight moved and fell on Maria. She walked slowly toward the piano, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. The whispers grew louder. Some people frowned, confused. Others smiled politely, thinking maybe it was part of the show. When she reached the piano, she sat down carefully, her hands trembling. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. Her mouth was dry. For a second, she thought she might not be able to move her fingers at all. But then she remembered her father's face again, that proud, gentle smile. Play for him, she told herself. Play for everyone who never got a chance to dream. She closed her eyes and touched the first key. A soft, delicate sound filled the air, pure and full of emotion. The crowd fell silent. Every note seemed to tell a story, of struggle, of love, of loss, of hope. The melody rose and fell like a heartbeat, alive and human. Maria forgot about the audience. She forgot about her uniform. In that moment, there was only the music. Her fingers moved faster now, confident and graceful. The sound grew richer, echoing through the grand hall. Some people leaned forward in their seats. Others closed their eyes, letting the music carry them away. When the last note finally faded, the hall was so quiet that she could hear her own breathing. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then, all at once, the room erupted in applause. People stood up, clapping and cheering. Some shouted, "Bravo!" Others whistled and called for more. Maria sat frozen, unsure what to do. Tears welled in her eyes. She stood, bowed awkwardly, and smiled through her tears. Backstage, the conductor was waiting. When she walked off the stage, he opened his arms and hugged her warmly. "You did it," he said with a proud smile. "You didn't just play. You touched their hearts." Maria wiped her eyes. "I can't believe they liked it," she whispered. "They didn't just like it," he said. "They loved it." Word spread quickly. Reporters rushed to write about the mysterious maid who stunned the concert hall with her performance. Some called it the most unexpected moment of the night. Others called her the hidden talent of the year. Later that evening, as she walked home, the streets were quiet. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement. She replayed the night in her mind over and over, the silence before the music, the warmth of the applause, the feeling of belonging. For the first time in years, Maria smiled without holding back. It wasn't the applause that made her happy. It was something deeper, the feeling that her music had finally been heard. The next morning, when she returned to work, everyone greeted her with smiles. Some clapped, others hugged her. Even the strict building manager patted her shoulder. "You made us proud, Maria," he said warmly. She thanked everyone shyly and went back to her cleaning duties. But now something had changed. Every time she walked past the piano, she didn't just see it as a distant dream anymore. She saw it as a part of her life again, something that belonged to her just as much as her mop or broom did. That afternoon, the conductor came to see her again. "Maria," he said, "people are asking about you. They want to know your story. Some are even asking if you'll play again at our next concert." Maria's eyes widened. Me again? He nodded. Yes, you have a gift and the world deserves to hear it. She didn't know what to say. She looked down at her rough hands, the hands that had scrubbed floors for years and yet still remembered the music. I don't know if I'm ready for all that, she said softly. He smiled. You were ready the moment you touched the piano. That evening, Maria sat alone in the empty hall after everyone left. She walked up to the stage, sat at the piano again, and played softly in the dim light. There were no cameras, no crowd, no applause, and only her and the music. As the notes filled the air, she felt peace. She didn't need fame or glory. She just needed this and the sound, the feeling, the connection to something beautiful. When she finished, she looked up at the empty seats and whispered, "Thank you." It was unclear whether she meant the piano, the hall, or life itself. Maybe all three. The maid who no one expected to play had not only stunned the concert hall, she had reminded everyone, including herself, that dreams may fall asleep, but they never truly die. The night of the concert would be remembered for a long time, not just by the audience, but by everyone who worked inside that grand hall. From the moment Maria walked onto the stage, something invisible had changed in the air. It was as if every sound, every light, and every breath in the room had started to move in rhythm with her heart. But that night was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the story of the maid who played the piano spread faster than anyone could imagine. The next morning, photos of Maria standing beside the piano appeared on social media. Someone from the audience had recorded her performance on their phone, and the video was already being shared thousands of times online. At first, Maria didn't know about it. She came to work early, like always carrying her mop and cleaning cloth. She thought everything would go back to normal, but the moment she stepped inside the hall, everyone started clapping. "Maria, you're famous," one of the sound technicians said, holding out his phone to show her the video. She blinked in surprise. The screen showed her sitting at the piano, playing with closed eyes. The caption said, "The maid who stunned the concert hall." She covered her mouth in shock. "Oh no, people are watching this?" she said softly. "They're not just watching," another worker said. "They're loving it." All around her, people were smiling. Some even hugged her. The conductor came out of his office holding a newspaper. On the front page was her picture, small but clear, with a headline that read, "Unexpected Talent. Hall Maid Brings Audience to Tears." Maria couldn't believe it. She never thought something like this could happen to her. For years she had been invisible, a quiet shadow in the background. Now suddenly everyone wanted to know her story. Reporters started calling the concert hall asking for interviews. Some wanted to film her playing again. Others wanted to know where she had learned music, or why she worked as a maid instead of a pianist. At first, Maria felt overwhelmed. She wasn't used to attention. She had always lived a simple private life. Work, eat, send money home, sleep. Fame was something she had only seen from far away. The conductor saw her confusion and smiled gently. "Don't worry," he told her. "Take your time. You don't have to say yes to everyone." She nodded, still unsure what to do. But one thing she knew for certain. She wanted to keep playing. A few days later, she was invited to perform again at a small event organized by the same concert hall. This time, she wouldn't be cleaning the floor or arranging chairs. She would be sitting at the piano again, but as a performer. When the day came, Maria stood behind the stage, holding her hands tightly together. The hall was smaller, but the lights still felt bright and heavy. The audience looked kind, though. People smiled at her, some even waved. The conductor came up to her before the show began. "Remember what I told you," he said. "Play from your heart. That's all anyone wants to hear." She smiled nervously. "I'll try." When she walked out, there was warm applause. She sat down, closed her eyes for a moment, and began to play. The melody flowed like a soft river. It was slow, peaceful, full of emotion. She didn't try to impress anyone. She just told her story through music. When she finished, people stood up again, clapping loudly. Some even called out her name. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She had never known this kind of happiness before. After the concert, an elderly man came up to her. He introduced himself as a retired piano teacher. "I've been teaching music for 40 years, he said. "And what you have, my dear, cannot be taught. It's something rare." Maria didn't know how to answer. She simply bowed her head and said, "Thank you, sir." That night, when she returned home, she found a letter waiting for her at the front desk of her small apartment building. It was from the concert hall's management. She opened it slowly, her heart racing. Inside was a short note. Dear Maria, we are proud of you and would like to offer you a new position as a part-time music assistant and performer at our hall. Your talent has inspired us all. Her hands shook as she read it again. She couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, her hard work and her dreams had come together. The next week, Maria started her new role. She still helped with cleaning sometimes. She said it kept her humble. But now, twice a week, she also played during rehearsals or small public shows. People came just to listen to her, not because she was famous, but because her music made them feel something real. One afternoon, while she was practicing, a group of children came to visit the hall for a school tour. They stopped to watch her play. When she noticed them, she smiled and waved. Do you want to hear something? She asked. The children nodded eagerly, their eyes wide with curiosity. Maria played a cheerful, lively tune. The kids clapped along, some giggling, some dancing in their spots. When she finished, they cheered loudly. One little girl raised her hand and asked, Miss, how did you learn to play the piano? Maria smiled softly. When I was your age, I didn't have much. But I found an old piano in my father's school. I learned one song, then another, and I never stopped dreaming. The girl tilted her head. So if I dream, I can do it too? Maria nodded.
Yes. You can do anything, as long as you don't stop believing in yourself. The teacher thanked her and the children left, but Maria stayed by the piano, thinking about what she had just said.
It was strange, she thought, how life could change so suddenly. How something that once felt impossible could become real. That evening, the conductor came to see her again. You have a gift not just for music, he said, but for touching people's hearts. You should share it more. He told her that another concert was coming up, was a bigger one, and he wanted her to perform again, this time as one of the main acts. Maria hesitated. I don't know if I can. I'm not trained like the others, he smiled. Music doesn't care about training. It cares about truth, and when you play, everyone feels the truth. She thought about it that night. She remembered all the years she had spent hiding her talent, thinking she wasn't good enough. She remembered the nights she cleaned the stage, watching others perform, feeling that the world of music was far away. Now, that same stage was calling her back. When the day of the big concert arrived, the hall was filled again, but this time Maria wasn't nervous. She felt calm. She wore the same simple uniform she always did, but there was something different in the way she carried herself. There was pride in her eyes. The audience was larger than ever. Some people recognized her from the video. When she walked onto the stage, they began to clap even before she started playing. She sat down at the piano, took a deep breath, and began. This time she didn't just play, and she told her story through every note. The music rose and fell like waves, full of emotion and memory. It spoke of struggle, of faith, of kindness, and of the quiet strength of those who are often unseen. By the time she finished, many in the audience were wiping their eyes. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the entire hall. Maria stood up, smiling through her tears. She bowed deeply, not just to thank the audience, but to thank life itself for giving her another chance. Backstage, she was greeted with hugs and congratulations. The conductor looked proud, almost like a father. You did it again, Maria, he said warmly. You made them feel. She smiled. That's all I ever wanted. That night, as she walked home, the streets were quiet. The stars were bright above her. She thought about her father, her childhood, the years she had spent cleaning floors while her dreams slept quietly inside her. She whispered softly to herself, I kept the promise. And she had. She had kept the promise she once made to the little girl inside her. The girl who loved music, who never stopped dreaming even when the world turned dark. The maid who once hid in the shadows was now shining in her own light. Not because she became famous, but because she found herself again through the power of music. Her story became a reminder for everyone who heard it, that talent has no title, dreams have no age, and sometimes the most beautiful melodies come from the most unexpected places. The night of the grand concert felt like the closing of one chapter and the quiet beginning of another. When Maria walked off the stage that evening, her heart was still beating fast. not from fear anymore, but from joy. The applause still echoed in her ears, and she could still feel the warmth of the lights on her face. For the first time in a very long time, she felt seen, not as the quiet maid who cleaned the floors, but as the woman who had finally shared her soul through music. After that performance, her life slowly began to change. The next morning, she woke up before sunrise as usual. Her little apartment was still simple, a small table, a bed, and the same old piano she had saved up to buy years ago. The fame hadn't reached her doorstep yet, and she didn't expect it to. She still cooked her breakfast the same way, still tied her hair the same way, and still whispered a short prayer of thanks before leaving for work. But when she reached the concert hall that day, she noticed something new. People smiled at her differently. It wasn't pity or curiosity anymore, and it was respect. The staff greeted her warmly, and some even clapped when she entered the rehearsal room. "Maria," the stage manager said, "there's someone waiting to see you in the lobby." She walked out carefully, unsure who it could be. Standing near the door was a young woman holding a notebook. She introduced herself as a journalist from a popular magazine. "I saw your performance last night," she said. "The world needs to know your story." Maria hesitated at first. She didn't like talking about herself, but the journalist spoke kindly. So she agreed. They sat in the small cafe beside the hall, and Maria told her everything, how she had learned piano as a child, how life had forced her to take up cleaning jobs, how she had never stopped dreaming even when nobody noticed her talent. When the article came out a few days later, it spread everywhere. People were touched by her humility and strength. The headline read, "The Maid Who Played from the Heart." Soon letters began arriving at the concert hall, handwritten notes from people all over the country. Some said her story gave them courage to follow their own dreams. Others said her music reminded them of hope. There were even children who wrote saying they wanted to learn piano because of her. Maria would sit by the piano in the evenings, reading those letters with tears in her eyes. She never thought her story could mean so much to others. One afternoon, while she was helping tidy up after a rehearsal, the conductor came to her with exciting news. "Maria," he said with a proud smile, "we've been invited to perform in another city, and they want you to play one of your own pieces." Her eyes widened. "My own piece? But I've never written anything down," he chuckled. "Then it's time you do. The world wants to hear your music." That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She sat at her piano staring at the keys. The window was open, and the sound of the night breeze mixed with the quiet hum of the city outside. Slowly, she began to play, soft, gentle notes that came straight from her heart. She didn't think about technique or perfection. She just let her fingers tell her story, her struggles, her hopes, her memories of her father, and the long years of silence. The melody grew richer, deeper. It was simple, but it carried emotion that words could never express. She named the piece "Light from the Shadows." When she performed it a few weeks later, the audience was completely silent. Not a single cough, not a whisper. Every note she played seemed to fill the room with warmth and truth. When she finished, there was a moment of complete stillness, and then a wave of applause that made her eyes water. People stood clapping and cheering. She bowed her head, overcome with emotion. After the show, a few music teachers approached her. They told her they wanted to include her story in their lessons, to show students that passion matters more than titles. One of them even said, "Maria, you remind us why we fell in love with music in the first place." It was then that Maria realized something important. Her journey wasn't just about playing piano anymore. It was about reminding people to believe in themselves no matter where they came from. Over time, Maria was invited to visit schools and community centers. She would sit with children, tell them her story, and play for them. She spoke softly with warmth and kindness. She would say, "I was once like you, full of dreams but afraid to show them. But dreams don't disappear, you know, they wait. They wait for you to be brave enough to open the door." The children loved her. They clapped and laughed, and some even hugged her. And every time she saw their little faces light up, Maria felt her heart grow lighter too. But fame didn't change her. She still helped around the hall, still smiled at everyone, still stayed late to make sure everything was clean. When someone asked why she still worked, she replied, "Because music taught me to be grateful. Every day is a gift." Months passed, and the story of the maid who became a musician continued to spread. People began calling her a symbol of hope. But to Maria, she was still just herself, a simple woman who loved the piano. Then one morning, she received a letter that brought tears to her eyes again. It was from a small village on her childhood home. The local school had written to tell her that they wanted to reopen their old music room, the same one where she had learned to play when she was young. They invited her to come and play the first song on the same piano she had used years ago. Maria couldn't believe it. The thought of going back filled her with emotion. When she arrived, the entire village was there to welcome her. Old neighbors, teachers, and even children she didn't know were gathered around the small schoolyard. The old piano was still there, worn and cracked, but it had been cleaned and polished for her visit. As she sat down to play, her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from love. She pressed the first key and the sound filled the small room, just as it had all those years ago. The melody was gentle, full of memories. She smiled through tears, thinking of her father who had first taught her those keys. She imagined him standing in the corner, nodding proudly. When she finished, the crowd clapped and cheered. Children ran up to her asking questions about music, and she told them, "You don't need fancy lessons to start. Just listen to your heart. Music lives there." That day, she donated her small savings to help buy new instruments for the school. "Every child should have a chance to dream," she said. Years went by. Maria continued to play, to teach, and to inspire. She never became a celebrity in the way the world defines it, but her story touched thousands of people. Musicians mentioned her name with respect, and those who met her never forgot the warmth in her voice. Sometimes she would still walk through the concert hall late at night, touching the piano softly. The hall that once knew her only as a maid now echoed with her music, and every time she sat there she would think, "This is what it means to be alive, to create something beautiful, to touch a soul, to keep believing even when no one else does." In her later years, Maria began teaching at a small music school nearby. She didn't charge much. She said music should be shared freely. Her students adored her. They said she didn't just teach them how to play, but how to feel. One of her students once asked, "Teacher, how did you never give up?" Maria smiled and said softly, "Because even when the world turned its back, the piano never did. When I played, I remembered who I was. That's what kept me going." Her words stayed with everyone who heard them. By the time she grew older, Maria's life had come full circle. She had started as a maid cleaning the stage, and she ended as the woman whose music filled that same stage with life. People still spoke of that night, the night when the quiet maid walked onto the stage and stunned everyone with her piano. But for Maria, the real miracle wasn't the applause or the fame. It was the journey, from silence to song, from invisibility to light. And so, the story of Maria, the maid who played, became a gentle reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary beauty lies hidden in the most ordinary people. You just have to give them a chance to be heard.